Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the final installment of the 2024 Fall Seminar Series presentations hosted by the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Center for Hellenic Studies at Simon Fraser University. My name is Dimitris Krallis, and I'm the director of the SNF Center. My role today would be to introduce the speaker and sort of moderate, if there's need of moderation, the conversation. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that this event is taking place at Simon Fraser University on Burnaby Mountain on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam and Cuicuatlam peoples. Now, I'm pleased to present today's speaker, Dr. Ayşe Ercan Kydonakis. Ayşe is the 2024-2025 Hellenism Past and Present Local and Global Postdoctoral Fellow with the SNF Center. She's a field archaeologist with an academic focus on the material culture of the late antique and Byzantine period cities, harbors, and frontier settlements in medieval Anatolia, as well as a specialist in their afterlives of this period's archaeological heritage in Seljuk, Ottoman, and Turkish Republic periods. Her work explores the evolution of archaeological practices and the intricate dynamics of cultural heritage politics, examining how archaeology has been strategically employed to construct political discourses related to the reimagining of imperial states and nation-building processes in both countries. And without further ado, I'll just pass the floor into you for our talk today.
So, thank you very much, Dimitri, for the generous introduction, and special thanks to the ones who made it to the campus despite the horrible weather. And so this paper was initially presented in a preliminary format at a conference held at the Para Museum in Istanbul in 2017. And the proceedings were published after 5 years, relatively quickly, in this book that you see on the right, Discovering Byzantium in Istanbul. So today I will present to you an adapted version. I changed it a little bit to cover a larger group of subjects, topics related to broader discussion, let's say. So let's start. In August 1923, İsmet İnönü Pasha, a diplomatic representative of the newly founded Republic of Turkey in Lausanne, received an encrypted message from Adnan Adıvar, president of the Der Saadet Muharraslığı, the government body temporarily established in Istanbul to handle international communications on behalf of the new Turkish parliament in Ankara. His Grace, İsmet Pasha, despite all efforts from our side, the French army commander, General Charpy, is not delivering the antiquities, specifically the virgin relief, found at the excavations that he conducted by himself. After having seized most of our belongings above the ground, now it's the time for underground. Please do inform General Bell about this issue, Adnan. During the foundation of the Republic of Turkey, antiquities regarded as the material embodiments of the crumbling Ottoman Empire were of great concern. They served as legitimizing tool for reiterating territorial sovereignty for the new Turkish government, which considered itself the custodian of these objects, thereby creating a direct link with the ancient civilizations of Asia Minor and by default the Ottomans themselves. The official dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire had been set in motion by the Treaty of Sèvres, signed at the conclusion of the First World War. One of the treaty's provisions included the abrogation of the Ottoman Law of Antiquities, Asari Atika Nizamnamesi, and the promulgation of a new law that the Ottoman government was expected to implement on the basis of perfect equality between all nations. Yet this law, this new law on antiquities, recognized the primary rights of the Ottoman government only in principle. exclusively monitored by the Allied Financial Commission. The law contains several articles that allowed the proceeds of the excavations to be divided between the excavators and local authorities, which indeed worsens the extant controversies considering the possession of antiquities. The Treaty of Lausanne, signed in 1923, which officially concluded the occupation of the former Ottoman lands, did not alter the situation. Instead, as evidenced by the short note sent by Adıvar to İnönü concerning the virgin relief found during the archaeological excavations at Sarayburnu Gülhane in the so-called Mangana quarter, the treaty preserved the status quo that emerged during the occupation period, with the Allies entrenched as the dominant actor in an unequal power relationship that was also manifested in the fate of antiquities. Given this, between 1920 and 1923, in regard to the Allies' archaeological activities, the new Turkish government had to take precautions against the French occupation army led by General Georges Charpy. Previous scholarship has dealt extensively with the archaeological excavations projects of the French Army of the East, L'Armée d'Orient, during World War I, providing insights into the organization, scientific aspects of these military excavation campaigns. Nevertheless, the perspective of the French occupation army and the 4 excavations it undertook in Gallipoli and Istanbul has been entirely omitted from the history of both Ottoman archaeology and post-Ottoman archaeology, or early Republican archaeology, let's say, largely due to the transitory character of that period for Turkey. This paper focuses on the history of these French excavations conducted during the occupation of the former Ottoman lands following the First World War. Through an examination of historical documents from the Ottoman and French archives, it reconceptualizes these excavation campaigns with a particular focus on the fieldwork in Sarayburnu. To give voice to both parties, comparisons are made with documents from the archives of the French school at Athens, l'École Française d'Athènes, which provide ample information on these excavations and their 5 protagonists: Charles Picard, Robert Demangel, Halil Erdem, Theodore Macready, and Georges Charpy, the general of the French occupation army. This reassessment of the history of the French excavations reveals how they relate to the historiography of Byzantine archaeology in post-Ottoman territories, what the excavations meant to the young republic during the War of Turkish national liberation, and what roles the protagonists played. Through this examination, an alternative historical account emerges for the argument that the excavations of the French occupation army epitomize, first and foremost, the survival of archaeological practices rooted in antiquarianism and colonial archaeology. In addition, these excavations encapsulate a particular moment in the history of archaeology that reflects the shifting political balance among France, Britain, and Germany following the First World War, in their struggle to politically, economically, and culturally dominate the Ottoman Empire and subsequently the new Turkish Republic. The French army developed a strong archaeological tradition, beginning with the Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, launched in 1798 and followed by its 19th century expeditions to Morea and Syria. Commissions on antiquities or colonial archaeological outfits quickly became an established feature of the army, promoting systematic and scientific surveys of the lands under French occupation. For instance, colonial expansionism into the Maghreb formed the basis of the French stranglehold on archaeological exploration in North Africa, in the 19th century. During World War I, Laime-Dorian developed a market continuity by assembling a team of experts to professionally handle antiquities encountered during military operations. The Archaeological Service of the Army of the Orient, officially founded in 1916, following a proposal by the art historian Charles Baillet, operated in territories extending from Greece to Afghanistan in collaboration with the Department of Oriental Antiquities at the Louvre Museum, one of the key imperial museums at that time. Given these activities and policies, the French came to view scientific research, including archaeology, as an integral part of the military occupations, driven in part by their duty to civilization and science, a perspective also held by many of their colonialist counterparts. Thus, an advisory commission under the presidency of Félix Sartio, who had worked as an engineer in Focaya, issued an urgent call in 1990 for the government to restore France's pre-war archaeological presence in Asia Minor. Competition with the British and the Germans, who had secured cultural monopolies on Ottoman territories in the 19th century, was certainly a major driving force behind this call. Infrastructure projects, especially the construction of the Berlin-Baghdad railway, were phalanxes that facilitated territorial dominance and lent momentum to archaeological excavations. A year prior to the start of the railroad's construction, the Germans established the Deutsche Orientgesellschaft to handle the archaeological remains discovered along the route of the railway. Theodor Wigan prepared a manual, and the title is Instructions for Geographical, Topographical, and Archaeological Observations, to help Germans, in particular engineers, evaluate and ascertain the value of antiquities encountered during the construction projects. The Germans' domination over railway construction in the Ottoman lands solidified their control over antiquities in Asia Minor. A process that contemporary French sources imply became a matter of international concern. Sartre asserted that the Germans had secured their monopoly on the Ottoman lands, and indeed, I quote, have raised the presumptuous pretension to have been the teachers, the educator of the human race, and to be the chosen people, the people of the masters. Yet, he also noted, it is the countries of Greco-Latin, Anglo-Saxon culture, Italy, France, and England that have been the promoters and inventors. Most of the great discoveries made in this field are their works of several centuries, end of quote. The competition between France and Germany, expressed in these words, explicitly reflects the centuries-old colonial discourse of the West, legitimizing their military or colonial presence in the East on the grounds of their having inherited the Greco-Latin banner. Yet, at the end of the First World War, the factions competing for antiquities in the East were realigned, with France and Britain attempting to restrain Germany. In the aftermath of World War I, the hegemony of the Allied forces over Ottoman lands generated new political dynamics in the occupied territories, previously culturally and economically dominated by the Germans. In this regard, the Armistice of Mudros, signed in October 1918, to conclude fighting in the Middle East, aided the French cause, with their occupying the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus. With the terms of the armistice in effect, the general of the French occupation army began archaeological explorations in 4 sites close to the military camps. Eleonte and, as you see on the slides, the so-called tumulus of Protesilas, both situated near the Sedilbayır Castle at the entrance of the Dardanelles, Bakırköy and Gülhane in Istanbul at two Byzantine sites within the French military camps. The French School of Athens was soon involved in the excavations, providing technical assistance. In 1921, Charles Picard, the school's director, appointed Robert Demongel, a classical archaeologist by training, to help supervise the army's fieldwork, which was to be jointly administered with military representatives. This was also a strategic decision in order to gradually demilitarize the army's fieldwork and thus straighten ties between France and the new Republic of Turkey for future archaeological collaborations, given the retrenchment of the French school's activities during the war years. Based in Istanbul, beginning in 1922, Demongel lived among the French soldiers in their barracks and sent regular reports to Picard, informing him about their fieldwork in Sarayburnu. In his letter, first letter to send to Picard, Demongel recorded his seemingly dismissive first impressions of the Mangana excavation. You see the French, the original version here on the slides. I quote, "I visited the palace excavations with Captain Blanc, not very exciting. The sewers of Paris are more artful." And it continues like, the Virgin is not bad, and then making fun of it. Anyways, end of quote. In contrast to Demongel's view of the archaeological remains, the excavation grew in reputation, particularly with the involvement of Ernest Mambouri and Theodore Macready. Over 3 years into the occupation of Istanbul, until the end of 1923, the French army excavated what would become one of the largest architectural complexes ever to be unearthed in Istanbul, identified with the Byzantine monuments once located in the Mangana quarter, renowned for the Mangana complex commissioned by Constantine IX, Monomachos, situated on the eastern slopes of the Acropolis in Constantinople. These developments also led local authorities to acknowledge the site as an important archaeological discovery for bringing Byzantine Constantinople to light, as the local newspaper referred. Nevertheless, the Ottoman archives imply that there was some degree of discontent about the army's activities in Demongel's sewers, with the excavations extending to a sizable area within the gardens of the Topkapı Palace, from the Gülhane military hospital to Sarayburnu, at the tip of the Sarayburnu Peninsula. On July 10th, 1921, the secretary of the Ottoman Vizier drafted an internal memorandum to the Ottoman Foreign Ministry concerning the French excavations. I quote, "On the seaside of the Imperial Topkapı Palace, in the underground structures by the Sinan Pasha Kiosk, there are excavations carried out by the French soldiers. Since it is reported that they also uncovered some artifacts, it is necessary to issue a permit and return all the finds to the Imperial Museum according to the law of antiquities. Therefore, it is advised that through the French embassy, an official application should be made to the Ministry of Education, and the reply should be conveyed to our side." Despite the uncertain future of the Ottoman lands, former Ottoman lands, the government of the new Turkish Republic had already opened the Anatolian Civilizations museum in the new capital Ankara in 1921, a sign of its prioritizing antiquities and its urgent desire to museumize its new national identity narrative. In 1922, Turkey established a directorate for antiquities in Ankara, which after 4 years would be subdivided into directorates for museums, libraries, and publications. This directorate developed 10 canons to supplement the 1906 Ottoman Law of Antiquities, advocated an inventory of the antiquities within the newly defined borders of the Turkish Republic. Similar to the previously amended laws, these canons stipulated that official permission had to be obtained for all archaeological excavations, which could only be conducted by scientifically qualified authorities, such as scientific commissions, universities, and individuals deemed to be expert. In addition, the law held that all antiquities and archaeological finds discovered outside the scope of an approved excavation had to be reported to the Imperial Museum within 15 days. In this respect, the memo from July 1921 provides clear evidence that the French excavation had commenced without the consent of the Imperial Museum, and excavation activities had also apparently not been reported in a timely manner, putting the French army in violation of existing law. Considering the political dynamics of the military occupation in an effort to enforce the law, the Ottoman foreign minister could only send a warning to remind French authorities of the official requirements for archaeological excavations, of which they must have certainly already been aware of. It should come as no surprise that in the final excavation report on the Mangana excavation, the only document in French recording this incident, Demangel obfuscates this tiny detail of the legal status of the fieldwork there, briefly referencing a certain Ottoman inquiry. Based on his account, the first campaign had begun in June 1921, validating the Ottoman report. Among the finds were, I quote, certain quality of coarse clay, invaluable and insignificant objects, and some ceramic fragments, end of quote. In a rather diplomatic manner, Demangel told the story of the discovery of the Mangano Carter as follows, I quote, the French superintendents had, for the supply of the troops, accumulated large stocks of wine in its barracks at Gülhane. At the strong heat of June 1921, necessitated storing them in a cooler place. The officers in charge, Captain Henriet and Lieutenant Pichore, realized that a number of underground structures in the precincts of the military park by the railway line towards the sea could be easily transformed into cellars. Therefore, they began to examine them and implement necessary arrangements for the storage of barrels. Thanks to the interest shown by the commander of the French troops, General Sharpie, simple fieldwork carried out in June 1921 with the help of 3 soldiers in the underground structures of the military park allowed the study of the important group of ruins in Mangana. The Mangana excavation episode was not the only incident that triggered concern among the locals and led to the spread of rumors, especially about precious antiquities being smuggled out of the country by the French army as Ottoman authorities attempted to monitor the archaeological fieldwork conducted within the military camps. According to a number of archival documents, the French army tried to secretly purchase land in Bakırköy, Hebdomon, to search for gold. As a matter of fact, from 1921 to 1923, under the supervision of Demangel, in Bakırköy, the French army uncovered the archaeological remains of a hypogeum, a monumental column with an inscription of Theodosius II, remains of a central plan church, and an Opus Sectile mosaic. Nevertheless, the presence of the French army seriously concerned local residents, particularly towards the end of the occupation period. For instance, a document dated to 1923 highlights a complaint by a resident of Bakırköy, Fatima Zafer Hanım, who lost her tenants because of the loud digs near her house. Eventually, the general sense of unease culminated in questioning why the French excavations remained ongoing, especially at the time when a peace treaty was close to being reached. The struggle of the new Turkish government over antiquities went hand in hand with its effort to assert its political authority. Already in 1920, after the new Turkish parliament held its first session on April 23rd, the Republic had an agenda in regard to antiquities and its cultural heritage narrative. The opening of the Anatolian Civilization Museum in 1921, as we discussed already, during the Turkish War of National Liberation, and the appointment of a museum representative, Theodor Makridi, to the army's excavation in 1921 indicate that the new Turkish state had gained sufficient status to negotiate over its antiquities. Furthermore, the political independence of the Turkish state encouraged the citizens of the new republic to push back against Ottoman armies' presence, as evidenced by Fatima Zafer Hanım's letter. Nevertheless, with the political situation improving for the Turkish government, the Allied armies appeared to seek alternative ways to conduct digs and to procure archaeological artifacts. For instance, the French army's fieldwork at Seddülbahir elicited notable objections. A report sent by Selahattin Adil Pasha to the Imperial Museum's Directorate is particularly useful for illuminating the details of this controversial episode. Having been a leading figure in the Turkish War of National Liberation, Selahattin Adil Pasha was appointed to oversee the Allied forces' evacuation from the occupied Ottoman lands, former Ottoman lands, and therefore had closely observed French army's activities, including their archaeological excavations. Adil's report informed the Imperial Museum's Directorate about the situation in Seddülbahir for the first time, stating in part that, I quote, "On the Rumeli side of the Dardanelles, the French army fenced off a territory of 100 decars for more than a year and discovered more than 500 monolithic sarcophagi and terracotta cups, which were said to be transferred to the Seddülbahir castle for now," end of quote. After Adil's cogent report, the Imperial Museum sent a notice to General Sharpie requesting further information about the nature of the army's work in Seddülbahir, but the general never responded. Moreover, a monitoring committee assembled by the governorship of the Edirne province was not allowed to visit the excavation site, which was protected by the guards from the French army camp. By April, the issue had escalated, and there were allegations of the French smuggling the Seddülbahir finds to France by sea. In April 1923, Imperial Museum Director Halil Ethem sent a message to General Sharpie calling for the immediate suspension of the Seddülbahir excavation. In a letter addressed to Picard, Demargel considered the request awkward and offensive. Again, Sharpie failed to reply. line. On May 29, Halil Ethem, in a letter announcing the new excavation permit granted to the French team for Theos, shared the situation with the French school's director, Picard. I quote, "I cannot help myself to share here an issue that I'm afraid may have negative consequences for your excavations, and also potentially create difficulties for French soldiers, French scholars who want to excavate in Turkey. These are the works executed by General Sharpie without authorization on the peninsula of Gallipoli, in addition to his refusal to return artifacts discovered at Gülhane, such as the Virgin Relief. In a personal conversation, he told me that for the moment, he could only give me the antiquities carrying secondary importance, based on Monsieur Demangel's opinion that the objects should remain on site until the work is concluded. These excavations, even the one in Gülhane, were started without the museum being notified, and I learned about them very late. I have been able to make arrangements for this affair with multiple difficulties, considering the friendly relations and the high esteem I have for General Sharpie. Unfortunately, his unconditional refusal to comply with the law's requirements compelled me, regretfully, to take this matter to diplomatic grounds and to share this with Monsieur Covey and friends in the Institute. I deny in advance all the responsibility on my part if by chance this affair would have negative consequences for your excavations. I beg your pardon for taking your time with these lines, but I thought I ought to warn you, dear director and friends. Possibly as a result of the waning political cloud of the Allied forces and increasing institutional pressure from the Turkish side that extended to the diplomatic realm, Sharpie finally wrote to Halil Ethem. I quote, "In response to your letter dated to April 24th, I have the honor of letting you know that it is indeed true that archaeological excavations were conducted by the French occupational forces at Seddülbahir on the peninsula of Gallipoli. The first work was undertaken in 1915 by the troops fighting in this region. This work served as relaxation for them between battles and otherwise gave few results. The work was thus abandoned for several years, and it was several months after my arrival in Istanbul I saw that the excavations were continuing. The Seddülbahir excavations of 1915, undertaken by 2 to 4 soldiers, were known from widely circulated French field reports published during the war. Following the conclusion of the archaeological excavations in 1916, a selection of archaeological finds was sent to France, and a number of them remained on site. In line with the Republic's international recognition, Sharpie agreed to return all the finds discovered after December 1st, 1922, hence leaving the fate of previous finds undisclosed. My analysis of the inventory lists kept in the archive of Istanbul Archaeological Museums show that the inventory list of the Eleonte finds from Seddülbahir was signed by Demangel and approved by Macready in 1924, which in a letter sent to Sharpie, Demangel cryptically referred to writing, "I arranged this matter with Macready." While the nature of this arrangement is unclear, a short and seemingly unimportant report published by the Louvre presents another list of finds. So I will give you the numbers here. 208 objects from the 1919 campaign, 1,017 objects from the 1923 campaigns. And the list refers to the Imperial Museum collection as well as having the museum in Istanbul having 300 objects from the same site. So the first Bahir campaign in 1919 possibly refers to the excavations in 1915, with the artifacts being transferred to the Louvre years later, unless there was another undocumented campaign. The second campaign between 1920 to 1923, during the post-war occupation of the Dardanelles, supports the presumption of an illicit dig with antiquities transferred to the Louvre. There is additional archival evidence about peculiar events that supports this possibility. For instance, during the artifacts shipment to Istanbul, a wooden chest that contained a model of a ship cast in gold, a large scuffos, and a bag full of cameos was dropped into the sea while being loaded onto the vessel, and strong currents prevented its recovery. An intergovernmental correspondence from 1924, after the Allies had withdrawn from Istanbul to Gallipoli, provides another piece of information about a controversial transfer of artifacts, also confirmed in a letter by Demangel. A French spy, Monsieur Léon, claimed to observe that the French army had sent 8 crates full of marvelous antiquities to France, while the other finds were left scattered on the field after the evacuation of the Allied military camp. In addition to the suspicions involving Bahir, a number of documents concurrently evince the post-Ottoman government's struggle to prevent antiquities trafficking in Istanbul. For instance, an opus sectile mosaic from Bakırköy is referred in several documents with regard to General Sharpey's interest, along with the 11th century marble relief of the Virgin found in Sarayburnu. The Virgin of Gülhane, today exhibited in the Istanbul Archaeological Museums, remained the foremost object of contention between Halil Ethem and Sharpey, as Demangel recounted in a letter. An expert from the Louvre Museum was requested to make a plaster cast, which General Sharpey thought to generously donate to the Imperial Museum in Istanbul in anticipation of keeping the original for himself. These are true, not these are all discussed in these letters. So despite Sharpey's expectations, however, upon the conclusion of the Lausanne meetings, the original relief finally joined the collection of the Istanbul Archaeological Museum, along with a number of finds from Eleonte. A few months after the Treaty of Lausanne, a final matter concerning Sarayburnu and the French army arose a couple of weeks before the last Allied troops left Istanbul. An illegal excavation by French soldiers near the Gülhane military hospital was cited in August's report, drafted by a commission established under the guidance of Selahattin Adil Pasha. Among the artifacts discovered in a garden neighboring the Gülhane hospital, where Raif Ağa resided at the time, were a number of inscribed marble slabs dating to the Byzantine period, and 2 pieces of a fountain dating to the era of Ahmed III. The Commission's report stresses that a vessel had been arranged for the transfer of the objects to France in 2 to 3 days' time. Nevertheless, Raif Ağa prevented the French soldiers from taking these marbles away, and then took the necessary precautions by hiding them in his own garden for their protection. Interestingly, in Demangel's catalogue of Mangana, we see two marble fountain pieces dated to the reign of Ahmet III, yet there is no information on their provenance. 10 days after this report, the fieldwork at Sarayburnu wrapped up, and the final report of the Mangana excavations was published 10 years later. Over the last century, this monograph has remained as the only scholarly publication documenting the monumental Byzantine remains in Sarayburnu that remained afterwards totally isolated, as the territory was off limits as a military zone until 2011. So in the 19th century, archaeology served as a potent medium for bestowing Western scientific knowledge on the East, which, according to them, had neither the cultural connections nor the necessary background to value antiquities' significance for science. The examination of the archaeological excavations of the French occupation army here point to the continuation of this tradition of mission civilisatrice into the 20th century, this time in the context of military conflict. The efforts of Ottoman elites to institutionalize archaeology starting in the mid-19th century did not suffice to alleviate Western concerns about the antiquities in the Ottoman lands. Despite the introduction of the Ottoman antiquities laws and the establishment of the Imperial Museum in Constantinople, Ottoman attempts to study, document, and preserve antiquities were seen as neither sufficient nor sincere. This sentiment is reflected in Charles Dille's following words, I quote, "There is no doubt that Turkey, in an effort to appear European and civilized, ventured in collecting antiquities, as it owns more than the half of the ancient Greek lands." It didn't take much to satisfy that passion. Can all these efforts solely be explained by Westernization attempts? During the late Ottoman and early Turkish Republican periods, local initiatives to preserve the archaeological heritage of former Ottoman territories, particularly in Istanbul, through the appropriation of Byzantium, manifest a more intricate cultural policy shaped by various factors. The late Ottoman period was a contentious moment in the Ottomans' extensive history, characterized by the dissolution of its multicultural and multi-ethnic structure, which coincided with a series of military conflicts. As a result, the Ottomans were slow to adopt a national identity, which influenced their official approach to cultural patrimony, taking a more holistic and imperial view of antiquities, which also embraced Byzantium. However, events such as the Greek War of Independence and the foundation of the modern Greek state, the Libyan War, the Balkan Wars, gradually fostered ideological rapprochement towards Turkish Islamic nationalism. These changes led to the restructuring of the state, privileging a specific ethnic group defined by the unity of ethnicity and religion. Following the Great War, the Ottoman Empire was reconstituted as the Republic of Turkey, which embraced radical structural reforms that foregrounded a unitary approach in matters of religion, language, and national identity discourse. The new Turkish state had ambiguous stance towards the legacy of the Ottoman Empire. While it initially appropriated Turkish national identity, it distanced itself from Islam to distinguish itself from the former empire that once ruled its territories. Within this broader context, Byzantium's role was not specifically articulated. However, Turkey was arguably more hostile to its Ottoman heritage than to its Byzantine heritage. During the War of National Liberation, the Turkish government also appropriated antiquities from the Byzantine period by revisiting the Ottoman law of antiquities, funding archaeological museums and Department of Antiquities, considering antiquities as substitutes for territorial sovereignty, particularly in their struggle against the occupation armies, best exemplified by the case of the French army and their archaeological excavations. Whether prehistoric, classical, or Byzantine, antiquities became a battleground between the Allied armies and the Republic of Turkey, which had an intricate way of viewing itself as the heir to the Ottoman Empire. Although Turkey adopted key aspects of the Ottoman administrative structure, it distanced itself from the empire's Islamic heritage, instead manipulating archaeology and anthropology to construct new national narratives for the Republic throughout the Kemalist reforms era, with the focus shifting to Ankara as the new capital of the Turkish Republic, rebuilt to showcase the Republic's cultural, architectural vision of national identity. Archaeology increasingly served this narrative, leaving Byzantium largely absent. Thank you very much.
So, wonderful. Thank you so much for this. And of course, I'm going to use my privilege as moderator to just ask the first question. But my take is a bit on the broader theme, but slightly outside the French School of Athens program. And I wonder if at all you start holding in your searches on any kind of internal French tensions. If, for example, army individuals operating a big in Istanbul find themselves with one type of agenda, as they also follow the diplomatic fate of the war between Greece and Turkey. And if, let's say, an Athenian sort of set of cadre, maybe with closer links to Greece, project other kind of ideas on how to do archaeology. And in the midst of this, from 1919 onwards, the Greek army marches towards Mudanya or something like that. So going towards the Dardanelles and becoming part of that picture. Is there such a tension at all?
So I was reading all these letters, correspondences between Robert de Mongeal, the representative of the French School in Athens, and the director, Charles Picard. So first of all, these people are scholars, I think. So they want to do their job in a proper way. But then they're facing with diplomacy also, because archaeology is closely linked with diplomacy. So they have this general who wants to keep the 11th century icon of Virgin and the Opus Sectile mosaic for himself. So they're definitely struggling between these two, like whether to oppose the general, but they cannot do anything. So they're trying to find a balance between Turkish authorities and then science, archaeology, and then like they're all exchanging letters between them. And there are also gossips. This Halil Ethem is asking too much. I think, I mean, Sharpie is right in this matters. And so, I mean, I see their reactions are changing also through time. When the Turkish government has become more powerful, I think they're more taking sides with them than the occupation army, because they're obviously about to leave. So I don't know if this answers your questions.
It's just fascinating because I guess, as you said, they want to dig, right? And they want
Of course,
access to
they want to publish.
to publications. So what are they going to do? I mean, the tides are
Also-
changing. We need to establish a relationship.
Yeah, also there is this thing, Demangel, you are probably familiar with his name. So he's a classical archaeologist and he's not interested at all what he is doing in Istanbul. So it's Ernest Mamburi, who is also a famous scholar. He's a scholar from Switzerland, but living in Istanbul at that time. And he was teaching geometry in Galatasaray High School. And he is doing really good job with this architectural drawing. So drawing this plan of the site in 1920s, all alone, this is unbelievable. Like without the help of any today's technology or a group of architects. My PhD is about the Byzantine remains in the Mangana region. And I took some friends of mine, some architect friends, and they were shocked. They told me you need a large group of architects to be able to document all this. One of the substructures are like 80 meters long and 30 meters large, like imagine. So all the work, all the publication is like owns, it's basically Mamburi's work, let's say. Demangel is just the name of the publication. So
Does Mamburi have soldiers kind of helping with measuring and all that stuff?
probably, yeah.
So these are his.
Because I also checked his sketches, which are kept in the German Archaeological Institute in Istanbul. He has some portraits of, for example, he says some French soldiers, Lieutenant, I don't know, Leon, for instance. Like he has portraits also together with the architectural drawings. So there were probably some people helping him, but still it's an amazing job what he did. Yeah.
Keep it family. Thanks for this. Actually, this was super fascinating for somebody who's a historian and an archaeologist. I have a question towards your conclusions. I find it fascinating the kind of whole Turkish nation building project from post-Hamidian Young Turks into the Roman Republic. And so you said Byzantium was kind of sidelined, which makes sense. It doesn't really fit the nationalist narrative. But I was wondering how is the early Republican view of Byzantium influenced by general views in Europe at the time of Byzantium as being this kind of longue durée prequel of the Ottoman Empire, right? This kind of orientalized, despotic, whatever you want to put it. They usually are seen as kind of these siblings almost, right? On the Christian, on the kind of Orthodox mystical side, and then on the kind of Islamic mystical side. Versus the excavations that were done on the Hittite culture, which I think was used in the Republican period to prove that they were the first Turks.
Yes, yeah.
And then the Greco-Roman antiquity, which is kind of fetishized in the West. So do we see more of it than Byzantium, even though it doesn't fit the nationalist narrative, but it fits the Eastern European kind of a thing. So
yeah.
I was just wondering if you could comment on
So
that.
one of the first things that Atatürk does in the new republic is gathering a group of scholars to legitimize the presence of Turks in Anatolia. So one of the anthropologists there, she comes up with the idea of relating Hittite culture to the Turks. So there's a specific name for this theory, Sun, and it's totally absurd. So even like, how can you relate, for example, Minos culture to today's Cretans, let's say? So they're building all this narrative around Hittites. So they're doing excavations, they're promoting the research on excavating, finding sites on like on the Hittite territory, etc. So in this, Byzantium is totally absent. And I don't think at that time they were viewing Selçuk Empire is absent too. So I don't think they had this understanding of Selçuks being in between Byzantium and the Ottoman Empire. So this comes much later, I think, after Atatürk. So
Thanks. I have a quick follow-up. It just occurred to me as we were talking, when writing, whether in kind of first Arabic script or later in Latin, when does the term Byzance become used in whether Ottoman Turkish or then later kind of the vernacular Ottoman Turkish? And when they switch from Rum to Byzance, right? When do they occidentalize it by the way the empire is viewed, right? But
yeah, I think they're very quick in appropriating. I don't know where it starts, but they are already in the end of, or like in the early 19th century, Byzantine history is included in the Ottoman history books. So they're using the term Byzantium.
yeah, that's actually that. So they're actually early adopters. That's pretty fascinating.
Yes, yeah, but I mean the term appears, of course, much earlier.
Yeah,
so
yeah, but in general, yeah.
I don't know exactly if they adopt the term Byzance back then in the 17th century, 16th century. So I'm not sure about that. But in the 19th century, definitely it's there. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Thank you very much for the talk. I'm wondering if there have been any talks for the repatriation of objects, repatriation of the objects that have been removed based on the findings that we have from French ships and.
I don't think so. There are so many objects that are asked from all around. Like I'm following the Ministry of Culture's work. So every time that they bring a smuggled object from well-known auctions, let's say, or the museums, they're publishing them. But these are, I don't know, a small collection and relatively not very, I mean, yeah, no, I don't think so.
In your discussion, you distinguish between when the archaeological dig happens and then concerns about what objects are actually taken.
Mm-hmm.
But from the point of view of archaeology, I had always thought that once you disturb the site, that's the big deal. And whereas in this case, the alarm bells seemed only to go off when objects were taken, rather than
Yes.
just what the opportunity to have that first date. And
Possibly this, I mean, it's when they realize that there is an archaeological aspect in this dig. Maybe this is my understanding of when they find something. Did I understand well what you're asking?
well, I mean, one gets the impression from Raiders of the Lost Ark that the concern is with getting the objects.
Yes.
Whereas I think we understand that
Archaeology is not that, yeah.
archaeologists are interested in the stratigraphy, just everything that you find out as you do the dig.
But you know, not all of them. Even the discourse of some departments, let's say, they're like, we are finding this much objects. We did this many excavations and found 5,000 objects this year. I mean, these are still existing discourses, and they're very wrong. As you say, I mean, archaeology is not finding something or like procuring antiquities. So, and this understanding is not established among everybody, even archaeologists, I think.
Well, just following up on that,
Yeah.
then the selection of the sites to dig, is it on the basis then, that they want Byzantine sites and not Ottoman ones? Or?
No, I mean, they excavated within their military camps.
So that's it.
So by chance,
Kydonakis.
yes, by chance in Istanbul, as the capital of the Byzantine Empire, they found Byzantine remains. And on the Dardanelles, where there are many, as like Troy is there are many tumuli also, they found earlier remains on the Dardanelles. So their main concern was not excavating Byzantine sites. So their location of their military camps brought them to. But the French scholars they have a very long tradition in Byzantine studies. So
I found it very interesting, the part where you mentioned the reaction of the local residents to excavation, and that French, if I understood correctly, French voted property so that they
yeah,
do excavation. So I think this shows, like this brings a really good insight on occupied Istanbul and the social life and how the locals perceive the occupation.
loud digs.
I was wondering if you have more to say about it, if you have more evidence on how the locals reacted.
I mean, yeah, that's a good question. These were maybe if I knew the Ottoman language well, I would have done a larger, broader survey of the newspapers or in the archives even. So these were the only ones that were available to me. So I found them by chance because these people wrote to the archaeological museum or complaining. But there might be other evidence in the newspapers of that period. Who knows?
What's the literacy rate at the time? It's not really, what's the literacy rate at the time? It's not really hard for random people to write. But she's clearly a landlady, so she's a
Yeah.
bit of upper middle class, and her handwriting looked nice, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Unless there is another person writing.
Writing on their behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was challenging to balance this. Like there's this story of there's the ship, French ship, who will take away our findings, our antiquities. They will smuggle our antiquities. So is that real? So it was a challenging process to balance all this material, putting them together chronologically, to double check whether who is right, who is correct, is this true? So what is exaggerated in that story? So yeah, please.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting talk. I learned a lot. I have a question about the Treaty of Lausanne. What changes with the Treaty of Lausanne in terms of, the ban on antiquities leaving Turkey?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they had to conclude their fieldwork and leave. So they were giving a certain time, I don't know, some months maybe, to conclude maybe 3 months to conclude their fieldwork, and they had to leave. So with Lausanne, I mean, Lausanne accepted the foundation, officially accepted the presence, the foundation of the new Turkish Republic. So all the rights for the antiquities were decided. I mean, they were on the Turkish Republic from the Lausanne onwards. So
Any type of collaboration from maybe with Imperialism?
this is a good question. Yes, Demangel returns and excavates this. This is today identified as a public bath, but back then because they wanted to associate all the remains, architectural remains that they found during the excavations with the famous monuments. So back then they wanted this to be the baptistry of the Hodegon monastery. So Demajel wanted to excavate here for 2 more years, I think. So he returns back to Istanbul in 1933, I guess. So he stayed in Istanbul to conclude his work. So, I mean, there were, even in Istanbul, some more collaborations after the Lausanne Treaty, so after the foundation of the Turkish Republic. And I don't know if you remember, I mean, there were too much information, but while they're threatening General Sharpie with cutting their ties with archaeological sites, they are giving permission for other fieldworks to continue in Aegean, near Izmir. Teos is an ancient site near Izmir, for instance. So some of the fieldwork, they continued, yeah. And right after the...
And even the letter, it's so delicate. We would like to advocate the possibility that this might be, it's this kind of French diplomatic roundabout way of delivering a threat that is.
But in his letters, he's not diplomatic at all. He's gossiping about the Turkish authorities, and he's giving sometimes nicknames also. So
That letter was an Ottoman letter in French, right?
which one? The French. Yeah, they were writing in French.
It was the Ottoman.
Yeah, Halil Ethem is writing in
Yeah.
French. Yeah, so
It is, and it is. I don't want to draw equivalences that are probably not historical. I've seen equivalent Ottoman French writing to the German authorities on a completely different issue, and it is always so cautious. Maybe it's the diplomatic language of the time. You deliver your message in a firm kind of manner, but it's always maybe it won't. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it. Beautiful.
there is another person that I want to mention briefly. I know that you want to go, but we want to. So Theodore Macready is a very important character because he is working he is the local Greek from Constantinople. So his French is perfect. He writes a lot to Picard, the director of the French school in Athens. And what was interesting, he writes also about his concerns about the Greeks back that time. He's writing, I'm afraid for my family. So if there's an opportunity for me in Greece, so I might happily consider to work in Greece. He's writing this very openly, and he is the first director of the Benaki Museum. So I couldn't find more information about him. There were just these letters kept in the French school. So I was sending emails to Benaki Museum. They told me they don't have anything. So I couldn't find his family also, anyone from his relatives. But his story is very interesting too. He's not very well known, but very important personality like that time, I think. Yeah.
Very well versed in French, like in the French culture.
Ali Lethem is the brother of Osman Hamdi, the founder of the Archaeological Museum in Istanbul.
So
Yeah.
His French is extremely
Yeah. Another.
So, well, it seems that we're out of questions. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation and a wonderful end for our fall seminar series. To the audience, who joined us here. Thank you so much for being here and participating, and same to our viewers online. We're renewing our sort of date for January. Please follow our announcements and both online and on social media. And wish you sort of a restful and hopefully relaxed festive season for everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you.